Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. It is now it's 9:12 p.m. in Budapest, where we're enjoying the last few days before the summer solstice. So we're still in the realm of days getting longer, and then within a few days, 4 days to be precise, we've reached the summit, and then it's downhill all the way. And as you know, I always note and mark how downhill and how rapidly we're heading downhill we are. So we can enjoy these last few days, and then we can start complaining again. So, welcome everybody who has joined me for this live stream. And it's middle of the afternoon in on the east coast of the United States. And having been a long time observer of the American scene, particularly the American foreign policy establishment scene, I think I can say with a fair degree of certitude that the United States has crossed the Rubicon, and that it will, within days, maybe hours, launch attacks against Iran. I mean, it's all of the signs are there. Um, why it's doing this is an interesting question. And the answer is not immediately obvious any more than it's immediately obvious why the United States uh, changed its policy, having engaged in what seemed to be very productive uh, negotiations with Iran, and changed its position from accepting some level of enrichment, on Iranian soil, some level of it. Why it shifted its policy and essentially adopted the John Bolton position and Netanyahu position that there can be no enrichment of uranium on Iranian territory, none whatsoever. That was an abrupt shift, and it was never explained why the United States changed its position. Trump just simply kept repeating, well, Iran can't have nuclear weapons. Iran can't have nuclear weapons. But that was a meaningless slogan because, as everybody knows, Tulsi Gabbard, the Trump's choice, Trump's own pick to be the director of national intelligence, had said in March. She testified in Congress, and the United States published, as it always does every year, a threat assessment report, global threat assessment. And that global threat assessment report, it said that Iran has not made any decision to have nuclear weapons. Iran has no capability of developing nuclear weapons. And this has been a consistent theme of the U.S. intelligence services for many years. This is going back to the George W. Bush era. So this is Tulsi Gabbard. This is the person that Trump selected to be ODNI, and that's what she said. She testified in Congress. So Trump has changed his view on that, and just as Trump has changed his view on not permitting any enrichment at all on Iranian territory. We have to keep in mind, and this gets forgotten all the time, but I keep reminding people, and not that it makes any difference, but according to the Gurney Halleck says, "Welcome to Gloomsville," population, George. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, I like to think that I could be the president of that. The Gloomsville. Kind of. This is a president of those peoples. That according to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, all states, nuclear weapon states, and of course all of the non-nuclear weapon states, are permitted to enrich uranium on their territory. They're not permitted to develop nuclear weapons, obviously, and they have to cooperate with the appropriate authorities. I mean, which is the IAEA. But there's nothing at all in the Non-Proliferation Treaty that says you are not allowed to enrich uranium on your territory. So this is just completely made up. This is totally made up by Israel and the United States, that certain states are not permitted to enrich uranium. Now, so we don't, we talked about it at length the other day, how it came about after all of the news reports that Bibi Netanyahu had been pestering Trump ever since January the 20th to launch this attack on Iran. He's been pestering him, and we covered this thoroughly, and that Trump continued to tell Bibi that he didn't think it was helpful, and that essentially the issue of the denuclearization of Iran was something that would be decided by the United States, not by Israel, but by the United States. And so Bibi came to Washington twice, and each time Trump told him, "No, we're not going to do this. We're not going to join in any kind of its negotiations are in progress." And as I said, from what we had heard from Steve Witkoff's descriptions of his negotiations with Iran, was that the United States would accept a certain level of enrichment, maybe less than the one stipulated by the JCPOA, and maybe there'd be changes to the terms of any new denuclearization treaty, like a longer sunset clause. Any enrichment would have to be done under the supervision of the IAEA. I mean, you could add all sorts of things to it, which would make it seem as if Trump has indeed improved on the JCPOA. But then at some point, the Trump line changed, and suddenly he went and adopted the position of Netanyahu, and strangely enough, he said the 60. He created this artificial deadline, which nobody noticed. He said, "Oh, 60. I'm giving them 60 days." Everyone now repeats, "Oh, 60 days, 60 days." But it doesn't mean anything, because there's no reason to impose any kind of a deadline. There is no reason for this deadline. Negotiations take whatever time they take, and nobody took the 60 days seriously to the extent that anyone even paid any attention to it, simply because Trump is always doing that. He's always creating these artificial deadlines and these artificial ultimatums, and then we forget about them. So just like with Ukraine, he creates the 2-week deadline. Oh, it's 2 weeks. Everything's going to be decided in the next 2 weeks. He doesn't explain why. What's so special about 2 weeks? So he says there's 60 days, and then we have the 60 days that Netanyahu apparently is the only person in the world who paid attention to this 60 days and said, "Well, that's it. The 60 days are up. Today's day 61. We have to attack." And according to the news reports, according to the the report, particularly in the Wall Street Journal, is that Trump didn't raise any objections to this. Now, it's not explained why he raised no objections to this. I mean, he is the president of the United States. This 60-day deadline, absurd as it is still a 60-day deadline set by the president of the United States. So why exactly is it up to the prime minister of a little country with a population of 9 million? Why does the prime minister of Israel get to enforce a deadline imposed by the greatest power on the planet? So it was kind of bizarre. But said, "Oh well, I didn't raise any objections to it." But apparently, this information was clearly kept from the rest of the administration, because Marco Rubio, in his initial tweet, he said, well, this is a unilateral action by Israel. But if it's the case, as the newspaper reports, that Trump and Netanyahu discussed this, and Trump had told Netanyahu, we don't have any objections to this, then the United States will certainly be complicit in what Israel did. I mean, if somebody tells you, you know what, I'm going to go and kill somebody, and you said, well, I guess you got to do what you got to do, and you make no effort to stop this, or particularly you make no effort to report the matter to the authorities, then you are complicit. I mean, not as complicit obviously as the killer, but you are complicit in the act, because it's a crime and you have done nothing to avert the crime. And in this case, it's clear that this was an unprovoked attack that Netanyahu was planning. So let's just first of all take a look at what Netanyahu said during his interview with Bret Baier. I think it was on Sunday. And where are we? Yes, I think this is it, yeah. No, was it? Let me get everything sorted out. This is always, yeah. Now.
Welcome back in here to Live and Now from Fox. Here on Live Now.
Okay, now I think I've got it. And let me then show you what happened in this interview between Bret Baier and Netanyahu on Sunday.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Mr. Prime Minister, welcome back to Special Report.
Thank you. Good to be with you, Brett.
First of all, let me start at the beginning. Why did you launch this operation now?
Because we were facing an imminent threat, a dual existential threat. One, the threat of Iran rushing to weaponize their enriched uranium to make atomic bombs with a specific and declared intent to destroy us. Second, a rush to increase their ballistic missile arsenal into the capacity that they would have 3,600 weapons a year, new weapons, within 3 years, 10,000 ballistic missiles, each one weighing a ton, coming in at Mach 6, right into our cities, as you saw today. And then in 6 years, 20,000. That's no country can sustain that, and certainly not a country the size of Israel. So we had to act. It was the 12th hour. We did act to save ourselves, but also, I think, to not only protect ourselves, but protect the world from this incendiary regime. We can't have the world's most dangerous regime have the world's most dangerous weapons. We're protecting ourselves, but by doing so, we're protecting many others.
Now, it hardly needs repeating that Netanyahu has been saying the same crap since 1992. And in particular, he said all of this in the run up to the Iraq invasion. He came to testify before Congress, and he declared then that, Saddam Hussein, of course, was extraordinarily dangerous. He had all these missiles, and was very close to a nuclear, getting developed a nuclear warhead, and therefore Israel was in huge peril, and of course the rest of the world was in huge peril. So that was, Netanyahu says all of this, and now Brett Baer, springs the trap. Well, not really the trap, but this springs the pertinent question, which is, well, that's not quite what the U.S. intelligence has claimed. So let's just watch how Netanyahu answers this.
I just want to press you on the intel on the nuclear part. Less than 2 months ago, the new director of national intelligence, Tulsi testified on Capitol Hill, saying that everything had been suspended since 2003 and had not restarted, that the nuclear program had not been restarted by the Iranians. So did something change from end of March until this week? Was the U.S. intel wrong?
The intel we got and we shared with the United States was absolutely clear. Was absolutely clear that they were working in a secret plan to weaponize the uranium. They were marching very quickly. They would achieve a test device and possibly an initial device within months and certainly less than a year. That was
within months and certainly less than a year. So that's the great urgency, that they would test the device within months and certainly less than a year. There doesn't seem to be any great urgency here. So what he talked to Trump, told him that there was this great urgency. Trump seemed to accept that there was a great urgency, and as we'll look at Trump's recent pronouncement, they're presenting this position. There is this great urgency. Well, Tulsi said this, but no, we've got this great urgency. What's the urgency? A few months, but certainly less than a year. Anyway, let's go on.
The intel we shared with the United States, I think we have excellent intel in Iran. I think we've proven that. And that is something that we couldn't possibly accept. Whether it would be 6 months or 12 months or 13 months is immaterial.
Whether it was 6 months or 12 months or 13 months is immaterial. Oh, really? 6 months, 12 months, 13 months is immaterial, even as negotiations are taking place. What was it? What was the negotiations that were supposed to take place on Sunday in Oman? I think that was the fifth round. So there was a fifth round of negotiations, as whether it's 6 months or 12 months or 13 months is immaterial. So there is no urgency. By his own words, Netanyahu's own words, there's absolutely no urgency. Nothing whatsoever has happened in recent times to demand an immediate action. So he's done this. He just went ahead, attacked Iran, and this is where it gets very sinister, presented the United States with a fait accompli. Because now, and as I say, we've crossed the Rubicon, because I think the United States is going to go in, because either Israel will have to come back to Washington and say, we haven't eliminated Iran's nuclear program, which means that we failed, and which means that the United States has failed, which means that Putin has won, which means that Xi Jinping has won, and which means that Trump has failed, or the United States has to come in on Israel's side and get the job done. But there's another aspect to it, and we'll look at it in a little bit, which is what is Israel's real military capability? It may be that Israel has launched a war that it cannot win. In that it doesn't have the military capability, it doesn't have the sufficient number of interceptor missiles to prevail in the long term against Iranian attacks, and that Netanyahu was going to tell the Americans, well, hey, this could be a serious crisis for Israel. It's a little like 1973 when, at the start of the Yom Kippur War, when Israel was facing catastrophe, and then the United States did the huge arms airlift for Israel. And the United States did this, Nixon did this, even though Israel had defied US policy, because the United States, since 1969, 1970, when Nixon Secretary of State had put forward the Rogers Peace Plan, Bill Rogers' peace plan, which Israel ignored, treated with disdain, refused to talk about it, refused to negotiate with Rogers. And the peace plan is, usual land for peace. Israel withdraw from occupied territory in return for Arab recognition of Israel, and, of course, some kind of a settlement of the Palestinian refugee problem. The familiar ingredients, nothing special, but that was the Rogers Plan. Israel refused to have anything to do with the Rogers Plan. And then when Egypt and the rest of the Arab world struck on Yom Kippur in 1973, essentially Israel was in a lot of trouble, having ignored all of the entreaties of the U.S. administration to take seriously the Rogers Peace Plan. And so Israel now was on the back foot. So what does the United States do? Instead of letting Israel, well, hey, we told you should take up a peace plan seriously. Instead of that, Nixon did the huge airlift to get Israel out of the tight spot that he was in. And so the same thing is happening here. So Israel launches this this attack. Now it may be, that it's hugely successful, and that all the Israel shills are saying this is fantastic victory and we've done great and blah blah. But it may not be, and it may well be that that the Americans know that that Israel's in a bit of a tight spot. It doesn't have the sufficient number of intercept missiles to keep warding off the Iranian attacks. But here we suddenly find out from Netanyahu's own mouth that there was no urgency. I mean, we know this from the Tulsi's testimony. We also know this from the IAEA report, which people talk about this. Oh, the IAEA report. But remember, the IAEA report, which was published on May the 31st, had simply said Israel is not in full compliance. Not Israel, sorry. Iran is not in full compliance with the requirements of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. It didn't say Iran is on the brink of acquiring its nuclear stockpiles. He just said Iran is not in full compliance with the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So there was nothing there to say that Iran posed any sort of a threat to anyone. Least of all, was there any recommendation by the IAEA that Israel take matters into its own hands, launch an attack on Iran to enforce the IAEA report? So this again is very much similar to the situation at the time of the invasion of Iraq, because if you remember, the Iraq War apologists were claiming, oh, well, there were all these UN Security Council resolutions demanding that full access to all of Iran's military sites, scientific research site, everything, full access, and Saddam Hussein wasn't permitting this. Therefore, we have to go in and invade Iraq. But first of all, in the first place, when he was with Saddam Hussein, the reason why there were no weapons inspectors in Iraq in 2002, 2003 was that Bill Clinton had withdrawn the weapons inspectors just prior to his launching this bombing attack in December 1998. You know, remember when he did that essentially to distract public attention from his Monica Lewinsky travails, his impeachment, and so he launched this ridiculous attack on Iraq. But before he started bombing, the weapons inspectors were withdrawn, and so they were withdrawn, and that's why there were no weapons inspectors in 2002. But that was then used as if Saddam was saying, "Oh, he's not in compliance with UN Security Council resolutions." But by the same token, if that's the issue, if the issue is that he's not in compliance with the UN Security Council resolution, then it should be up to the UN Security Council to decide what action, if any, it wants to take in order to enforce its resolutions, which is the same here. If it's the case, and it's by no means obvious that it is the case because Iran denies it, but if it's the case that Iran is not in full compliance with its obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, then it should be up to the UN Security Council to take up the matter and decide what it wants to do in order to enforce the Non-Proliferation Treaty. It's not up to Israel to make that decision. It's not up to the United States just simply to make that decision. Well, I don't really like the way these reports, and I think we're just gonna go in and take out your all of your nuclear facilities. But this is word for word, absolutely the same thing that was said in 2002, 2003. Apparently, he's not in full compliance with this. Therefore, unilaterally, we're going to make this decision to launch this attack. This time Iran, but then 20 years ago it was Iraq, and the media are doing exactly what they did 20 years ago. More than 20 years ago now, clapping with glee. And this after all of the talk about, we're not going to be taken for a ride again. We're not going to be, we're not going to go for fake intelligence. No. We're wise to that. This is the this intelligence is faker than even the Iraqi intelligence. You have the U.S. intelligence agencies, Tulsi Gabbard, saying no evidence that Iran has any intention of developing nuclear weapons. She says this. This is Trump's pick, Trump's own pick. She says this, and now we have, we had the IAEA report for 2 weeks ago, saying, okay, it's not in full compliance with the Non-Proliferation Treaty, but certainly didn't say that there was any evidence that Iraq was weaponizing its nuclear stockpile. And then we have Bibi, who says here, well, it might happen in 6 months. Let's just listen to this again. Just listen to his disgusting words again.
Until in Iran, I think we've proven that, and that is something that we couldn't possibly accept. Whether it would be 6 months or 12 months or 13 months is immaterial. Once they go that route, it's too late, and we will not have a second Holocaust, a nuclear Holocaust.
Oh, right. That's oh, yeah. I whenever he starts the whole nuclear Holocaust and everything. So that's the Netanyahu who says this: 6 months, 12 months, 13 months. No urgency, whatever, except, nuclear holocaust. Oh, yeah, the nuclear holocaust. This, again, Israel is the only power in the Middle East that has nuclear weapons. Iran does not have nuclear weapons. Iraq doesn't have nuclear weapons. Saudi Arabia, no one has nuclear weapons in the Middle East except Israel. Israel is not a signatory of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Israel gets to lie to the rest of the world because everybody, there are countries that are obviously known to have nuclear weapons. I mean, you've got the 5 permanent members of the Security Council who have all publicly said that they have nuclear weapons. Now we have India and Pakistan who have also said that they have nuclear weapons. Israel, however, we know it has nuclear weapons, but Israel, for some reason, is permitted to be cutesy about it, to be coy about it. So we all know that it has nuclear weapons, but somehow Israel is not under any obligation to admit to the world that it has nuclear weapons and how many it has. We know, how many the British have. We know how many the Americans, the Russians. They'll tell us what they have. So with Israel, not only do we not know what it has, we don't even know that it has it. I mean, it's allowed this utter dishonesty, and then it gets to dictate to others, what level of nuclear enrichment Israel will permit. So that was now the next thing was kind of interesting because this was I think this was again Netanyahu. Let's see, when he was with
U.S. officials tell us
the
president.
So this is Netanyahu being interviewed on ABC News on the issue that supposedly Israel wanted to assassinate Khamenei, the Iran's supreme leader, and that the United States allegedly said that we're not on board for this. So here we have Netanyahu is asked, what do you make of this this story?
Flatly rejected a plan, an opportunity that the Israelis had to take out the supreme leader. Do you understand his concern? My understanding is his concern is that this would escalate the conflict beyond where it is already.
No, it's not going to escalate the conflict. It's going to end the conflict. We had the peace.
So it just say what it says. It won't escalate the conflict. It will end the conflict. So he's basically saying here that the assassination of Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, is obviously a desirable outcome because it will not escalate the conflict. It will end the conflict. It will end the conflict. This is very serious stuff. I mean, if you're going to go down this path of assassinating the supreme leader, and incidentally, I'm absolutely sure that Israel is considering it. I don't know whether it's going to happen, but it's quite likely that it will happen. That's who these people are. These Israelis are, and as we'll see, the unhinged nature of this state, the state of Israel, which is just an insane, illegal state. I mean, it's not bound by any kind of norms that govern, normal states. It's basically just it's a law unto itself. It kills, bombs, assassinates, terrorizes, burns civilians, women, children, babies at will, because Israel has a right to defend itself, because we have to avoid another Holocaust. So, but some of that lunacy has now been embraced by Trump. Now, to a certain extent, the United States has always embraced a little bit of that lunacy, but not quite as strongly as Trump has. So, but anyway, let's go. I want to show now. This was Netanyahu talking about Khamenei. It will end the conflict, and then today, the Israel's Minister of Defense went beyond that. So let's take a look. Let's see.
I warn the Iranian dictator from continuing to commit war crimes and fire missiles at Israeli citizens. He should remember what happened to the dictator in the country neighboring Iran, who took this path against the state of Israel. We will continue today as well to operate against regime targets and military targets in Tehran, as we did against
let's just go back.
Missiles at Israeli citizens.
Let's just go back again. Listen to what he just said.
I warn the Iranian dictator from continuing to commit war crimes and fire missiles at Israeli citizens. He should remember what happened to the dictator in the country neighboring Iran, who took this path against the state of Israel. We will continue today as well to operate against regime targets and military targets in Tehran, as we did against the Propaganda and Incitement Broadcasting Authority. I call on the residents of Tehran to evacuate those areas in accordance with the instructions of the IDF spokesperson in Persian for their own protection.
Now, if you recall, Saddam Hussein was indeed put on trial after he was captured. It was a joke of a trial. It was an absolute ridiculous thing. But what happened was that the United States wanted to put Saddam on trial for lots and lots of crimes and whatever. But in the end, he was only really charged with one crime committed against Iraqis. It was just in 1982. There was a insurrection or rebellion, or maybe there was an assassination attempt against Saddam, and Saddam supposedly went ahead and punished the villages from which these would-be assassins came from. So a number of people were killed. Of course, numbers that pale in comparison with the numbers that Israel kills. But nonetheless, according to the charges, he essentially terrorized the civilian. Now, the trial was, of course, a joke. I mean, it was an absolutely ridiculous. He wasn't allowed any proper defense counsel. The Americans ran the show trial from start to finish. I mean, it's contemptible. This creature, this Israel Katz, the Israeli defense minister, starts bringing that up. That trial of Saddam made the Stalin show trial seem like the model of exemplary and fair-minded jurisprudence. I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous. Even the Human Rights Brigade, that I normally despise, because they're always cheering on these ridiculous war crimes trials. Even the Human Rights Brigade said this trial was a mockery. The Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International. So that's what Israel Katz is now threatening Khamenei. But of course, there's not going to be a trial of Khamenei. They would just simply assassinate him. But we don't yet know whether whether that plan um, has been decided upon. Let me now. I want to talk about Trump's increasingly unhinged statements. I mean, he's just simply completely gone off his head. I mean, he was in Calgary, Canada, over the weekend to attend this G7 meeting. He left a day early, and then, as is his wont, he kicked up a tweet storm, which we can look at. But before he did that, he talked to reporters aboard Air Force One. So let's take first. We'll take a look at what he said to the reporters, because they wanted to know, well, is the United States coming in against Iran on behalf of Israel? And if we are, then isn't this something that should be debated, at the very least debated within the United States? If the United States is going to war against a major power, a country, population 90 million, you're going to go to war, and you're doing it on behalf of another state, that is something that does require a little bit of public debate. But anyway, here's Trump then aboard Air Force One, and let's just take a look.
How's it going?
It's going well. Did everybody have a good time?
Did you have a good time?
How about you? I did. That was a good time.
You just posted right before we took off that you're not leaving because of a ceasefire. Why are you? Can you elaborate?
We're not looking for a ceasefire. I didn't say I was looking for a ceasefire. That was Emmanuel, nice guy, but he doesn't get it right too often. But we're not looking. We're looking for better than a ceasefire.
You're looking to get into this more. You're not going to involve the U.S. in this conflict. State, you're going to do anything more for Israel right now?
Doing pretty well right now. We're doing pretty well. Remember, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Notice that we are doing pretty well. He has now identified himself with Israel. We are doing pretty well. So Israel, which, remember, Marco Rubio has said in the immediate aftermath of the Israel's attacks, that this is a unilateral action taken by Israel. And Trump himself, in some of his tweets or some of his truths, had said, we have nothing to do with this. Now he's saying we are doing pretty well. So as we, that's Israel and the United States, are doing pretty well. So it sounds like this attack on Iran is being carried out by Israel and the United States. We are doing pretty well. All right, let's go on.
It's very simple. You don't have to go too deep into it. They just can't have a nuclear weapon.
What was your thinking on the call for Tehran to evacuate? Is there a threat or is there incoming? What was the thinking on the whole evacuation?
I want people to be safe. And that's always possible. A thing like that could happen. I just want people to be safe.
Is there any concern about U.S. troops or assets in the region at all?
Great people that know how to protect themselves.
And when you say better, what's
we'll come down so hard if they do anything to our people. We'll come down so hard that the gloves are off so beautifully. Now, I think they know not to touch our troops.
Are you sending the vice?
When you say
do you plan to send the vice president and Steve Witkoff? There's reports that you want to send the vice president and Steve Witkoff to meet with the Iranians and have discussions. Is that something you're considering?
Not sure yet. I may. Depends on what happens when I get back.
What specifically is better than a ceasefire? What are you looking for here?
An end. A real end, not a ceasefire. An end.
So something that will be permanent.
Or giving up entirely. Is that okay too?
Are you close there? Are you possible? Is that possible in the next 24?
Why not? Certainly possible. Complete give up. That's possible. Yeah.
So here is saying I'm not interested in a ceasefire. I'm going for an end, a definitive end. So now he's really embraced the most extreme Israeli agenda, because he's talking with an end, and this end isn't even denuclearization, just removal of nuclear material. Maybe that's what he means, though he doesn't specify. I mean, it sounds like the goal that has already been spelled out by the Israeli leaders, which is removal of Khamenei, which is regime change. And no matter how much the U.S. government can say, "Oh no, we're not in the business of regime change," if you listen to this is where it's going. An end. So, and it's a complete give up, as he says.
The Chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the Secretary of Defense drawn up plans for you if Iran were to attack U.S. bases or do any damage to U.S. bases. Can I ask you, because there's been some skepticism, is there any guarantee that if the U.S. did get involved militarily, that a U.S. bomb could destroy Iran's nuclear program and facilities?
Everything or anything in our life, you know that. Look at you, right? There's no guarantee. But you're saying a guarantee on what?
Do you think if the U.S. got involved militarily, it would actually wipe out Iran's nuclear program? Or where's your assessment of that?
Their program's going to be wiped out long before then. But they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. What can you
So he keeps repeating this: they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. They don't have a nuclear weapon. They don't have a nuclear weapons program, and this continues to get repeated. And now it's possible that what he has in mind, because he seems to leave open the possibility of another meeting between the Iranians and Steve Witkoff and J.D. Vance. And that's what, they're going to give up. So in other words, the Iranians will say, well, we can't take any more. Send in your trucks and just dismantle everything in our laboratories, and take all the equipment, take all the enriched uranium, take everything that we've got, and ship it out. Well, that was the view propounded by John Bolton. So Trump here has embraced the position of John Bolton. In which case you have to wonder, well, why did you call John Bolton a lunatic? I mean, this is the view of John Bolton. Bolton wanted to do this to Iran. Bolton wanted to do this in North Korea. And at the time, this was during his first term, Trump didn't seem to think this was such a great idea, even though he allowed John Bolton to sabotage the Iranian talks and to sabotage the Korean talks. But so here now he's embraced this extreme John Bolton Zionist neoconservative agenda. We're 5 months into this presidency, and he hasn't explained why have you suddenly reversed so drastically what not only what you campaigned on, but even during the first term, you didn't go down this path. And indeed, if you recall, Bolton was always urging Trump to bomb Iran. He wanted the United States to bomb Iran because the Iranians had shot down a U.S. drone, and then apparently Trump decided, well, it's just a drone, it's just a piece of metal. We're going to kill people, and that doesn't seem proportionate. You shoot down a piece of metal, and in return you kill people. So that was a correct position. But now Trump is embracing the most extreme view, and Iran hasn't even shot down a drone. In fact, Iran hasn't done anything wrong. So here is the he says, well, we're just going to go ahead and do this because Bibi says so.
Israelis are going to slow down, or are they going to get the accelerator right now?
We're going to see. You're going to find out over the next 2 days. You're going to find out.
Has the gang of eight,
Nobody's slowed up so far.
has the gang of eight been notified of?
So this is then continue. Then I want to just play a little bit something that was quite interesting.
It's called max time.
Mr. You've always said that you don't believe Iran should be able to have a nuclear weapon, but how close do you personally think that they were to getting one? Because Tulsi Gabbard testified in March that the intelligence community said Iran wasn't building a nuclear weapon.
I don't care what she said. I think they were very close to having.
Just listen to that. I don't care what she said. Iran was very close to having a nuclear weapon. Just listen to this again. Let's listen to this again.
Abraham Lincoln and George Washington, they would go max. It's called max time.
Mr. You've always said that you don't believe Iran should be able to have a nuclear weapon, but how close do you personally think that they were to getting one? Because Tulsi Gabbard testified in March that the intelligence community said Iran wasn't building a nuclear weapon.
I don't care what she said. I think they were very close to having.
So there it is. I don't care what she said. They were very close to having a nuclear weapon. Now, that's his own appointed ODNI. I don't care what she said. Now, interestingly, Trump isn't really being attacked for having this contempt for his own intelligence the way he was. Remember at the time of Russiagate, at the height of Russiagate hysteria, when Trump refused to believe the claims of the CIA and FBI and all the rest of them that Russia interfered in the 2016 election. And then you came on, he's not refusing to accept the findings of his own intelligence agency. He's trusting Putin more than his own intelligence agencies. But now he says, I don't care what she said. They were very close to having a nuclear weapon. How does he know? What source is he using? I mean, she's the one who sees all of the intelligence reports from all of the agencies. She oversees all of the intelligence agencies. And she said that there is no evidence that Iran has a nuclear weapons program. So she sees all the intelligence. What is his source of intelligence? Well, the question answers itself. Bibi. We heard, the rubbish that he was spouting to Brett Baer. But even he had said to Brett Baer, well, 6 months, 12 months, 13 months, what does it matter? But Trump says, they were very close. So he's embraced what Bibi has said, but he's actually gone much further because he's saying, well, they were very close. Because Bibi isn't saying that they were very close. Bibi is just spouting the same stuff he's been spouting 30 years, 6 months, 12 months, 13 months. But Israel has been saying this exactly the same thing for 30 years. 6 months, 12 months, 13 months, what does it matter? And now Trump says, they were very close. So he's embraced the most extreme position. This is the most extreme Israeli position. And now he seems to be on the brink of throwing the weight of the United States into this into Israel's campaign. So and then, as I was saying earlier, he kicked up a tweet storm after the after that interview, or after that presser, and let's take a look at what he wrote. I shouldn't really say it's a tweet storm. I think it's a truth storm. And here we have. Let's find this. So this was the first truth that he sent out, and here he says Iran should have signed the deal I told them to sign, which already is kind of confusing because it's not clear what the deal was. What deal? There were negotiations. This is the first we're hearing that there was some sort of a deal that he told them to sign. Now, if he means a deal, hey, you have to completely capitulate. Well, Iran had already said we're not going to capitulate. So why were there all these rounds of negotiation? That's not, he said the deal that I told them to sign, so take it or leave it ultimatum. Then Iran wouldn't have bothered to negotiate because they've already said we're not going to accept this ultimatum. We're not going to accept anything that demands of us that we stop enriching uranium. So he says, well, this is the deal I told them to sign. So I'm assuming the deal is you dismantle your entire civil nuclear program. You dismantle all of your research facilities and everything and hand everything over. And that's the deal. That's not a deal. That's a capitulation. But if that was the case, why was Trump and his negotiators working, negotiating something? They had all these meetings with Steve Witkoff. And then he says, what a shame and a waste of human life. Simply stated, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. All uppercase. I said it over and over again, everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. This is very, this was already the first of his unhinged truths. Because if he says everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran, it sounds as if he's threatening the civilians of Iran with terror attacks. He's basically telling them that everyone should evacuate because terror attacks are on their way. Everyone should evacuate Tehran. Why? Why should they evacuate Tehran? What do you have in mind? Because there are no nuclear facilities in Tehran, and this is a very important point because he's saying here, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. So presumably that's an attempt to justify the Israel's attacks and America's support for Israel's attacks. But then he says everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. Why then is Israel attacking Tehran? What's in Tehran other than Iran's military and political leadership, which means that it is regime change. So having said, he just was it a few weeks ago, and we were live streaming and we were talking about Trump's speech in Riyadh, and he was very eloquent. No more regime change, no more color revolutions. And then here he is, he's now embracing this because that's the only way you can understand this comment that everyone should evacuate Tehran when there are no facilities. There are no nuclear facilities in Tehran. So it's essentially, it's either he means it's a terror campaign against the civilian population of Tehran, or is basically Israel is launching an attack against all possible centers of Iran's political leadership, in which case it's essentially, regime change. The very thing you said, and you repeated it over and over and over again, that the United States wasn't going to do, and you in particular were not going to do. So then, let's see, I can, this is somehow slowed down a bit. Okay. So that was the first of his unhinged truths. And then he went on and was more and more loony. So then he sent out a lengthy truth by his insane ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. Huckabee, as we know, is he is this evangelical Christian. He's a fanatical Christian Zionist, and absolutely insane supporter of Israel. If you recall, during the time of the negotiations over the JCPOA, so that was back in 2013, 14, 15, he was saying that Obama was asking the Jews to march into the gas chambers. That's what they said, that Obama is asking the Jews to march into the gas chambers. That was what the JCPOA was. For Jews, it's the marching into the gas chambers. And so here is Huckabee. He sent this message out, and Trump retruthed this. He retruthed it. He sent this out. Obviously, his approval. He never sends stuff out that he doesn't personally approve of. So here is what Huckabee said. Mr. President, God spared you in Butler, Pennsylvania, to be the most consequential president in a century, maybe ever. The decisions on your shoulders, I would not want to be made by anyone else. You have many voices speaking to you, sir, but there is only one voice that matters, his voice. So this is God's voice, his voice. That's the only voice that matters, God's voice. And then he says, I am your appointed servant in this land, and I am available available for you, but I do not try to get in your presence often because I trust your instincts. No president in my lifetime has been in a position like yours. Not since Truman in 1945. So Truman in 1945, which was to drop the atom bombs on Japan. Not since Truman in 1945. I don't reach out to persuade you, only to encourage you. I believe you will hear from heaven, and that voice is far more important than mine or anyone else's. You sent me to Israel to be your eyes, ears, and voice, and to make sure our flag flies above our embassy. My job is to be the last one to leave. I will not abandon this post. Our flag will not come down. You did not seek this moment. This moment sought you. It is my honor to serve you, Mike Huckabee. So you kind of wonder, what on earth is he on about? Other than is likening Trump's situation to the decision that Truman took in August 1945 to drop 2 atom bombs on Japan. And he seems to be saying either that Trump should drop atom bombs on Iran, which I assume he doesn't really want to do, but I don't know whether we can make these assumptions, but but it sounds like he wants Trump to go for some final war of annihilation against Iran. This is, he talks there that this is your message. This is a message from God. Remember, this is an evangelical Christian. This is he's a Christian Zionist. He's an absolute fanatic. He's the ambassador to Israel, but he's a complete fanatic. And so therefore, he clearly is seeing all of this as some apocalyptic war. And that this is now, God has spared you. God spared you in Butler, Pennsylvania, and he spared you for a reason. He spared you to do some great act on behalf of God's chosen people. And this is a religious apocalyptic message that Trump sent out. You know, I mean, the funny aspect of it is that, you know, the consensus among sort of all the commentators, the pundits, is that it's Iran that is that's a fanatical, the fanatics of Iran, and that they're ready to go down in flames. They're ready to wage these apocalyptic wars. They don't care. They don't have any rational self-interest dominating their lives. It's only us, Westerners, enlightened Westerners, who are motivated by rational self-interest. They don't care. No, they're martyrs. They want to join God, and therefore they're ready to destroy everything. Well, that's kind of what Huckabee was saying to Trump, and Trump sent this out. Said apparently, that's okay by me. So that was yet another bizarre truth. But that wasn't all. He then sent out some more truths. He says, again, Iran should have, this is the same one, this is the one about evacuate Iran. And then he lashes out at Emmanuel Macron because Macron had told the press that Trump had left the G7 early in order to negotiate a ceasefire. I'm not sure why Macron said this, but because I don't think Trump gave any indication that he was interested in the ceasefire. So I don't know what, but Trump obviously was very annoyed with Macron for saying this. He says, publicity-seeking President Emmanuel Macron mistakenly said that I left the G7 summit in Canada to go back to DC to work on a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Wrong. He has no idea why I'm now on my way to Washington, but it certainly has nothing to do with the ceasefire. And we saw his presser aboard Air Force One, and he said, I'm not interested in the ceasefire. I want a kind of a final settlement. I want to basically do an end, complete give up, as he put it. Much bigger than that, whether purposely or not, Emmanuel always gets it wrong. Stay tuned. So this was already quite ominous because he says much bigger than that. Not ceasefire, much bigger than that. Stay tuned. And think, well, that doesn't sound good. And then he goes, America first means many great things, including the fact that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Make America great again. So now these problems are arising because he's heard that there are divisions among the America First crowd. I mean, he'd already spoken when he gave an interview to The Atlantic magazine that he alone can say what America First is or is not. He alone, because he coined the term and he's the inventor of it. Now, of course, he didn't coin America First. America First was, of course, the movement that was associated with Charles Lindbergh, and which was about basically America pursues its own self-interest and doesn't interfere with other countries' conflicts unless they have had something to do with the United States. And that was the view of Charles Lindbergh, who during the 1930s, I think perfectly appropriately said, this war in Europe has got nothing to do with us, and we should stay out of it. That's America first. And then it was reinvented, or at least updated by Pat Buchanan when he ran during the 1992 campaign. So the America first is Lindbergh, and then in its modern form, Pat Buchanan. So now, but Trump's now saying, "Oh no, I am the inventor of America first." And then says, Iran cannot have it. But now, so he's heard that he's coming under criticism, particularly from Tucker Carlson, to a lesser extent, Steve Bannon. Bannon doesn't want to burn his bridges. It happened to him during Trump's first term, and he suffered for it. He was banished from Trump's court for a number of years, and I think Bannon doesn't want to go down that path again. And so he kind of goes along with Tucker, but he's much less forthright than Tucker. So then Trump sends this out and says, somebody please explain to kooky Tucker Carlson that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Now, first of all, again, he's just repeating this mindless slogan, but it's very interesting for him to refer to Tucker Carlson as kooky, because Tucker Carlson had become part of his inner circle. They often appeared together, at the GOP National Convention. Tucker was sitting very close to him, you remember that time when there was a debate, one of the debates during the primaries, and instead of taking part in the debate, Trump gave an interview to Tucker. So now he's kooky. And anyway, then Trump sends out, he says, I have not reached out to Iran for peace talks in any way, shape, or form. This is just more highly fabricated fake news. So no peace talks. If they want to talk, they know how to reach me. They should have taken the deal that was on the table. There was no deal on the table. Negotiations were ongoing. Would have saved a lot of lives. And so he says, I'm not interested in peace talks. So this is why I started off the podcast today saying, I think that America is now heading inexorably towards war. I mean, this is also, this refueling aircraft have been moving into the region, been moving out of Africa. A number of aircraft carrier groups are now moving in the region. So it seems like America is moving its forces for action. But Trump wasn't done yet. He then sent out this all caps truth, unconditional surrender. Now, of course, we all know that unconditional surrender was the demand made on Nazi Germany. Even during World War II, this was a very controversial demand, and not everybody was on board for that, because for the obvious reason that it might act to prolong the war. If Germans decide, well, we've got nothing to gain from suing for peace, because we would get the same terms as if we would as unconditional surrender, then why would we do it? All that would happen is that the humiliation of the unconditional surrender, of the terms that come with unconditional surrender, the humiliation would be on us, and we will be blamed for the humiliation. So of course the Germans had no incentive at all to negotiate anything with the Allied powers, and little incentive really even to assassinate Hitler. I mean, there was a plot, a half-baked plot, but what was significant about the July plot was that most of the general staff took no part in it. You know, I mean, Rommel was sort of involved, but no one within the senior general staff took part in the plot, because they knew, well, what's the point of it? You know, we kill Hitler, and then we get blamed for the unconditional surrender. So it was a controversial decision, even in World War II, and certainly could well have prolonged the war. But that was Hitler. But here Trump is demanding unconditional surrender from the leaders of Iran, and it's very peculiar because it's still not clear what it is that the leaders of Iran have done wrong. I mean, why? What have they actually done wrong? They didn't attack anyone. They didn't wage war against anyone. They were negotiating. They were negotiating a new nuclear agreement. So it's you know Israel launched this attack, and now Trump has embraced the most extreme, the most fanatical view from Israel. So this isn't even, oh, the neocons, oh, this is the Iraq war lobby and whatever, AIPAC or anything like that. This is Trump's embrace of the most fanatical, the most narrow-minded, the most insane elements of Israeli society. This is Ben Gvir. This is Smotrich. That's now the position of Trump is, and now you're associating the United States with this loony position, unconditional surrender. And then he goes on. He goes even further. He says, we know exactly where the so-called supreme leader is hiding. He is an easy target, but is safe there. We are not going to take him out. And then he puts in parentheses, kill. I don't know quite why he puts that in parentheses. Everybody knows what it means when you say we're to take somebody out. That, yeah. At least not for now. So he's now making an even more direct threat to assassinate Khamenei than Netanyahu. Netanyahu, remember in that interview with ABC News, he just said, "Oh well, that will, if you take out Khamenei, it actually make peace more likely." And then you had the threat from the Israel Katz, the defense minister, saying, well, remember what happened to Saddam Hussein. But here's Trump now saying he's an easy target, is safe there. We're not going to take him out, at least not for now. So maybe not today, but maybe tomorrow. So here, the President of the United States is openly threatening to assassinate the leader of a country with which the United States is not at war. I mean, we're not at war with Iran. We were negotiating with Iran, but there's still no state of war with Iran. And here is threatening to assassinate the leader of that country. And then he says, but we don't want missiles shot at civilians or American soldiers. Our patience is wearing thin. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So now he's saying we don't want missiles shot at civilians. So I don't know what he's referring to, missiles shot at civilians, but presumably he's more or less embracing the notion that any Iranian missiles that hit Israeli cities, even though they're targeting legitimate Israeli targets, such as the Mossad headquarters or any military headquarters, because they're all located in Tel Aviv, in civilian neighborhoods. But he says, so any missiles that hit civilians may, according to what he's saying here, justify assassinating Khamenei. So we don't want missiles shot at civilians or American soldiers. So he puts the two together, even though they're obviously two very different things. I mean, even if you were to kill American soldiers, that's quite a leap to say, fine, we're going to assassinate Iran's supreme leader. But here he's saying, well, yeah, if they shoot at Israeli civilians, that might be grounds for assassinating Khamenei. And then Trump says, we now have complete and total control of the skies over Iran. We. That's Israel and the United States. We now have a complete and total control of the skies over Iran. Iran had good sky trackers and other defensive equipment, and plenty of it, but it doesn't compare to American-made, conceived, and manufactured stuff. Nobody does it better than the good old, I think it says, yeah, good old USA. Those were the strange truths that he sent out, which that I mean, if that is a call to arms, and that's essentially, effectively, a declaration of war. I mean, it's clearly he's going to war. Now, the bizarre aspect of it is why the public, the politicians, the media are not asking Trump, well, why are you doing this? Why are you going to war against Iran? What has Iran done to justify this? Have they killed any Americans? Have they attacked anyone? You've got nothing. I mean, there's absolutely nothing here to justify this. And he is now ranting, declaring that he intends to do all of this without providing any explanation. And there's no demand, really, from the politicians, no demand from the media, and the media are all excited about this, for an explanation as to why exactly he is doing this. Now, there are it's a possibility that he thinks that Israel has the upper hand. Israel can deliver, and he wants to associate himself with a successful outcome. You think, oh well, Israel will be successful, and then America will be part of that. We will denuclearize Iran, and then I'll get my Nobel Peace Prize or whatever he thinks he's going to get. That he's basically, if that's what he thinks, this is entirely coming from Israel. Israel is telling him all of this. The idea that this is all going to be very easy, and that these bunker buster bombs, if that's what he's planning on doing, if the bunker buster bombs are going to destroy Iran's nuclear facilities, well, I don't know. I mean, that's there's the claim that he can pull this off. But I don't know if he can. But there's another aspect to it, which is that, and this is what I was alluding to earlier, which was that it may well be that that Israel is in some trouble, because it may not have enough by way of intercept missiles to prevail against Iran, and that therefore, I don't really like. I don't like making these kinds of predictions, because then, sound too much like the usual suspects on the internet. Oh yeah, this and this is going to happen. Israel's in a lot of trouble and whatever. But it's possible that Israel launched this without having the capability to sustain a lengthy missile exchange. So there were a couple of interesting articles about this in the Financial Times and in the Washington Post. And here, let me find this. So this is the FT, and the story is, how long can it last? Israel and Iran's endurance battle. And then it says, aerial war of the city pits IDF jets against Tehran's missile reserves. And then it says, military experts can only guess how many missiles Iran has remaining and the level of sophistication which is being weighed alongside the remaining magazine depth of Israeli anti-missile systems. So this is really the issue, which is that, all right, obviously, Israel managed to take out a number of Iran's ballistic missiles, and we don't exactly know how much Israel was able to take out, what Iran has left. And then, but then you have Israel has this very sophisticated anti-missile defense system, but that is not infinite, and because they have to have the interceptor missiles, because essentially, you have to start taking them out. So even if you take out one missile, other missiles are going to get through. So that's the question. We don't really know just how many intercept missiles Israel has. So as the FT goes on, Israel's layered defenses, Iron Dome, David Sling, and Arrow, have brought down a vast majority of Iran's missiles and attack drones. But the reserves of interceptors are not infinite. As Ukraine has shown, the longer a conflict continues, the weaker interception rates tend to become. Iranian security figures have suggested Tehran's deadliest missiles are still in reserve, possibly waiting for Israel's stock of interceptors to be depleted. So that's we don't know what exactly Iran has in reserve. And then FT goes on, there's no information on how many of these advanced missiles were built and how many have been destroyed by Israel. They include solid fuel missiles with maneuverable warheads, such as the Fatah 1 and Haj Qasim, and the Khorramshahr, a liquid fueled missile that can carry a 2-ton warhead. The IDF on Monday claimed it had destroyed a third of Iran's missile launchers. But we don't really want to believe everything that Israel says. I know the media do. The media always, reporting these fantastic victories by Israel and, taking on faith everything that the IDF says, but we don't know. And then the Washington Post, slightly different take, but nonetheless along the same line, says Israel-Iran conflict could last only as long as their missiles hold out. Even so, Israeli analysts caution that more than a half of Iran's arsenal remains intact, and an unknown quantity of missiles may be hidden in underground depots. And while Israel has significantly degraded Iran's attack capabilities, mounting a defense has been costly for Israel. The Marker, a leading Israeli financial newspaper, reported that missile defense cost Israel as much as 1 billion shekels, or roughly $285 million a night. That's quite a whack. Israel is not the United States. It's a small country, small population, prosperous, but 285 million a night, that's quite a sum. Without resupplies from the United States or greater involvement by US forces, some assessments project Israel can maintain its missile defense for 10 or 12 more days if Iran maintains a steady tempo of attacks, said an individual briefed on US and Israeli intelligence assessments, adding that as early as later this week, Israel's systems may only be able to intercept a smaller proportion of missiles because of a need to ration defensive munitions. They will need to select what they want to intercept, said the individual who spoke on the condition of anonymity. The system is already overwhelmed. Tal Inbar, an Israeli missile expert affiliated with the Missile Defense Advocacy Alliance in Virginia, noted that in 2014, Israel sought a ceasefire with Hamas days before it ran out of air defense interceptors. Now, that was 2014. Of course, Hamas really has nothing but firecrackers, but admittedly, that's more than 10 years ago. The level of interceptor stocks is highly sensitive subject in Israel, but it could be a factor in a ceasefire this time as well. Israel employs a multi-layered defense system consisting of its famous Iron Domes, which intercepts lower altitude rockets, the David Sling and Arrow system, the expensive Patriot and THAAD missile defense system delivered from the United States. And then Imbar said the problem for Israel is that it largely relies on the relatively expensive Arrow system, which fires missiles that cost $3 million each. While inexpensive and mass-produced Iron Dome interceptors are useful against rudimentary rockets fired by Hamas, the Iron Dome is as ineffective as shooting a 9mm pistol at heavy Iranian missiles that hurtle through the outer atmosphere several times the speed of sound, Inbar said. On Friday night, Israeli air defenses failed to stop Iranian missiles that narrowly missed the headquarters of the IDF, but slammed into Tel Aviv. On Sunday night, Iranian missiles took out a major oil refinery near Haifa. And on Tuesday morning, videos filmed from nearby and posted on social media, which the Post verified, showed 4 impacts from Iranian missiles in the vicinity of Israel's intelligence headquarters north of Tel Aviv. None of the 4 appeared to strike Mossad headquarters, landing hundreds of meters away. But one impacted inside Camp Moshe Dayan, a nearby site that reportedly hosts Israel's military intelligence headquarters. So all of these stories, I always take with a pinch of salt. I think it's quite possible that Israel has a problem, has a missile problem. They don't have a kind of missile strength in depth to sustain a lengthy war with Iran. That these interceptor missiles, first of all, Israel may not have that many of them, but they're also quite expensive. And then this is where the United States comes in. So the way Trump is presenting it, oh, Israel is winning, Israel has done so well, and that somehow, we're just going in to do a mop-up operation. That may not be true. There may be something else going on, which is that his Pentagon chiefs and his intelligence people are telling him, Israel's in a lot of trouble. In the first place, it's launched this war to denuclearize Iran, which it doesn't have the capability of doing, so that's bad enough. But they don't even have the missile defense system that can sustain for long Iranian missile barrages. Now, of course, we don't know what Iran has, what Iran's missile capability is, where it's getting the missiles, because it's presumably it may well be getting missiles, probably not from Russia. Russia doesn't have any missiles to spare. And I don't think Russia wants to get involved in this. But they could get some from North Korea. Maybe there's something from China. I don't know if China wants to get involved, but it's possible. But North Korea may well have a nice reserves of ballistic missiles. So therefore, while Trump gives this gung ho, we're doing fantastically well, there may well be something else going on, which is that and that's why he notice how many times he said, "Oh, I'm not seeking a ceasefire. Oh, I'm not seeking a peace. I want some, really a final settlement. Something. They're going to give up, they surrender, and whatever." The more he says this, the more questions that you raise, which is that if there is a ceasefire now, then Israel is lost, because then Israel has not accomplished any of its objectives. It has certainly not accomplished in taking out Iran's nuclear program. It is not accomplished as yet. All right, they can kill Khamenei. That may happen. They may well assassinate Khamenei, but that doesn't get you anything. Khamenei is not a central figure in Iran the way Khomeini was. But even that, I'm not sure. After all, Khomeini died 10 years after the revolution, and somehow the Islamic Republic of Iran continued. So he wasn't that essential to the survival of the regime. And that was Khomeini. So even if Israel takes out Khamenei, and so far Israel has conducted these targeted assassinations, but these targeted assassinations haven't yet had any real impact on Iran's military capabilities. Or maybe it will have, but at the moment I haven't seen any real impact. Iran continues to attack Israel with missiles, and as with these, we looked at these news stories. They say, well, we don't know what exactly Iran has up its sleeve. It may well have some serious heavy missiles that it's holding back on, and it may be holding back on them, waiting for the United States to show its hand. So it says, it's not unlike Russia in Ukraine. I think you're holding back for the moment that NATO might get directly involved. So in this case, given the bluster from Trump, that the United States will get involved. In that moment, Iran will need its heavy missile capabilities. So I'd say that it's quite possible that the pressure is coming on Trump to get involved precisely in order to prevent a defeat for Israel. If that sounds unusual for me to say, because I'm usually a kind of a pessimist and assume, no one can withstand Israel and so on. But I think in this case, it may be that it's in the White House, in the Pentagon, they're saying that this war may turn out not so badly for Iran. Any ceasefire for Iran at this stage, without Israel accomplishing any of its goals, will be a huge victory for Iran and a obvious humiliation for Israel. But now, with Trump having completely identified himself with the Israel cause, it'll also be a humiliation for the United States. Anyway, let's go to our locals page and talk to the Gagglers, the people who make sure that the dogs are fed and groomed and are in a good mood. It's very hard. They're not in a good mood. They just feel that they're doing all the work, but they're not. But they're not. Hold on. Okay, sorry. Got to just yep. So I really appreciate everyone who contributes, puts something into the tip jar. That puts the dogs into a better mood, and that makes my life easier. Anyway, Shopronka says, please could you comment on this if you have time? Okay. Vasily Nebenzia, permanent representative of Russia, spoke to reporters at the Security Council stakeout shared via the Google Apps. Okay, I haven't read this. And I'll comment on this next time. I mean, unless it's got some text I can look at, but if it's a video, then I need to look at, then that might be a little. Let's look at. Okay, all right. Well, I'll look at it, and it says you are not authorized to access this page. Okay, well, I'll take a look at what Nebenzia. I'll probably go to the Russian mission to the UN website, and I'll probably get it there, and I'll comment on it on Thursday. So I'll definitely do that. The Russians have taken the position, in the general, and what Nebenzia said at the last UN Security Council meeting, and Lavrov said the same thing, and Putin himself said the same thing, which is that they've been they've condemned Israel. They say Israel has acted, unreasonably, aggressively, and of course they've denounced the Western powers for enabling Israel, for whipping up anti-Iran hysteria, particularly at the IAEA. They've created this sense of crisis. It was a fraud. There was no crisis at all. So Nebenzia said this last week, as did Lavrov, and but at the same time, the Russians are taking the view that, well, we have to maintain negotiations. So there has to be some peaceful settlement to all of this. Now, that's fine to say things like that, but negotiations about what exactly? How can Iran negotiate when it had been negotiating and had been lured into taking all this process seriously, and having done nothing wrong, it got attacked? Why would Iran take seriously commitments made by Israel and the United States? And Russia, of all people, should know that how can you negotiate when you've already made a mockery of past negotiations? And Russia has this experience. They can go back Minsk. They complain about, the Minsk talks were a fraud. James Baker's commitment in 1990 was a lie. And the commitments made at the time of the overthrow of Yanukovych were a lie. Russia has repeatedly said, how can we negotiate with people who are lying and who use negotiations in order to lull their adversaries into a false sense of security, and then they pounce. Yet they insist upon Iran taking seriously these negotiations. Why would Iran Why would Iran believe anything Trump tells them? Trump having told them that he was negotiating seriously, is now talking about unconditional surrender. Why would they go back and say, oh yeah, okay, we will negotiate? Why would Iran negotiate with Israel, which launched a completely unprovoked attack? Whatever negotiations Iran was engaged in, it was in negotiations not with Israel, but with the United States and with the JCPOA partners, the P5+1. So I just found, the both Nebenzia's statement and Lavrov's statement just meaningless. I mean, you're asking Iran to do that which Russia would not do, to go back and start negotiating. And so that that, and I have to say, Russia was supposed to have provided Iran with these S-400 anti-missile defense systems. They never materialized, which I find very odd. Now, it may be that Iran wouldn't know how to use the S-400s, but it's much more likely that Russia didn't provide the S-400 anti-missile systems because Israel objected to Russia's providing the S-400. So although all these stories, the Russians have provided the S-400, there's no S-400. Russia never provided Iran with the S-400s. And the S-300s were all pretty much taken out by Israel back last October 2024. Russia has provided its good friend Erdogan with the S-400s, but Iran, supposedly part of the anti-Western axis of resistance, Iran never got the S-400 because Israel would have been very upset about it. Anyway, but I'll take a look, Shopronka, at Nebenzia's comment. Chopin says, I meant the blocking of Russian statements regarding the passenger train incident. Okay, so I'll take a look. So, Psinuk, always very good to see you. Thank you very much for your generosity. I really appreciate it. And Psinuk says, appreciate all the content. Thank you very much, especially the live stream yesterday. Thank you. What do you make of Trump ignoring all U.S. intelligence and the DNI director that Iran is 3 years away from a nuclear weapon? Does this prove he's a shill for the Israel lobby? It is unbearable to watch the Israel first agenda. Will Russia do anything? Well, as I was saying earlier, he contemptuously said, I mean, we played that what he said in that presser on board Air Force One. I don't care what she said. That's Tulsi Gabbard. This is the person that he personally appointed to that position. The person who endorsed him, she's a former Democrat. She came over to the Republicans, endorsed him before the election, and that was not an insignificant act. He appointed her ODNI. It was a difficult process that she went through. And she was the one who said in March that that Iran doesn't have any intention, see no evidence that Iran has the intention to develop nuclear weapons. And then he said, and then Trump says there on aboard Air Force One, well, I don't care what she said. I know that they were very close to a nuclear weapon. How does he know? Who told him? The only people who are saying this, the only people are Israel, the Israeli government. Netanyahu, but as we saw, Netanyahu was, when he was talking to Brett Baer, he said 6 months, 12 months, 13 months. So there's no imminence. Even Netanyahu says there's nothing imminent there. And yet Trump says, oh, well, they were very close. So now to answer the question, so, if I were Tulsi Gabbard, I would resign. I mean, if your president says, I don't care what she said. I mean, the president says, I don't care what you say. I mean, then I mean, how can you go on? I mean, he didn't say, well, we had an honest disagreement of opinion. There were other members of the cabinet who took a different position or whatever. This was, or whatever. I mean, just saying, that it was we had a lengthy debate about this, whatever. He just said, I don't care what she said. I don't quite understand now how she can continue in that job. Now, I obviously understand that she doesn't want to quit, because if she quits, it might be a little difficult for her, because Fox News will not be open to have her, being a paid contributor. And there's only so many interviews that you can have with Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon, and they don't. And that, I doubt whether they're going to pay her. So I can see. I mean, I don't think she's that wealthy, but I don't think she's wealthy at all. So I can see why she may not want to quit as ODNI. But her position is now untenable. You can't have a president saying, "I don't care what she says," and then you just carry on as if nothing had happened. Trump has embraced not just the Zionist lobby's agenda, not just AIPAC, not just the Israel First agenda. Trump has embraced the most extreme Israeli elements. So the fanaticism that now Trump is espousing, this regime change, taking out the leaders of Iran, unconditional surrender. This is Ben Gvir. This is Smotrich. This isn't even AIPAC anymore. So he's gone beyond being a shill for the Israeli lobby. He's just become, a member of the most fanatical element of the Netanyahu government. It's unbearable to watch the Israel First agenda. It's disgusting, and I have to say, few things are quite as repulsive to me as looking at Israeli government spokesmen. It's a visceral thing. I mean, I find them physically just repugnant. They evoke a kind of a physical reaction in me. Now, will Russia do anything? No. As I said, Russia's position that somehow we've got to go back to the negotiating table when there's nothing to negotiate. I mean, Iran is being attacked, Israel is being bombed, having done nothing wrong. What's there to negotiate other than complete capitulation? Both the United States and Israel have made clear that nothing short of capitulation, and that may mean just simply give up all of your nuclear program, ship everything out, and that's it, or just the surrender of the clerical regime. Israel and the United States may well embrace the latter, the most extreme position. So I don't quite know what Russia means by negotiation. Now, just to repeat what I said, will Russia do anything? Well, Russia had an opportunity to provide Iran with the S-400 anti-missile defense systems. Russia didn't do that. Why didn't it do it? I suspect because Russia is as vulnerable to the machinations of the Israel lobby as is the United States. The Israel lobby is very powerful in Russia, and they made sure that Putin did not provide Iran with the S-400. And that's why Iran really was pretty vulnerable to this attack. It had very limited air defense capability. What few S-300 systems it had were knocked out by Israel last October. That was in October, but nothing seems to have been done between October and now to replenish Iran's air defenses. So no, Russia will not do anything. Anyway, but thank you very much, Sinok. Robert, always good to see you. Greetings from New Jersey, where the cold, gloomy weather, keeping summer fun at bay, feels oddly in sync with the state of the world. All right, okay, well, yeah. I mean, you're on my you're on my plane, on my level. We're talking the same language. Keeping the gloomy weather, keeping summer fun at bay, feels oddly in sync with the state of the world. I have to say, the New Jersey beaches were very nice. I went to a few of them. They're really really nice, because they weren't as crowded. At least I don't know, the few that I visited, they weren't as crowded as the ones in Queens, which were just simply intolerable. But that was my experience. So New Jersey is quite a nice place in the summer. Um, just wanted to ask if you find Alex Craner's case persuasive that Trump's constant Iran can't get a nuke mantra, his red lines focused only on US bases, and his conspicuous silence on defending Israel all suggest he's double crossed not just Iran but Israel too. The better to get shot of Israel, as he seems to want to do with Ukraine. I don't see it that way. I mean, this is a sort of Trump playing the 5D chess move. I really don't see it. I think he has now identified himself with Israel's cause. And as I say, not just with Israel's cause, but with the most extreme elements in Israeli society and government. And I don't know how he gets himself out of that. Because if he were, if you have the machination and all of the truths that we've looked at and all of his comments that he's made to the media, they all suggest that he's taking a very absolutist. He keeps saying Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. Well, that deal is available. That's that was never been in dispute. That's available. So you have to think that he means something else, and that is the non-enrichment part. And this is why I wanted to let's see if I can find. I want to let me just because J.D. Vance was this is not right. Let me, because he sent out some truths today, essentially arguing Trump's case, because obviously this is causing a crisis within MAGA, that that hey, you were supposed to keep us out of stupid wars in the Middle East. Now you're dragging us in on behalf of another state. And then here was J.D. Vance, who sent out this long explanation on Twitter. And here it is. He says, look, I'm seeing this from the inside, and I'm admittedly biased towards our president and my friend, but there's a lot of crazy stuff on social media, so I wanted to address some things directly on the Iran issue. So this is, again, the crazy stuff. Who's the crazy stuff? Well, that's Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Bannon and so on. So it says, first, POTUS has been amazingly consistent over 10 years that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. So again, this mantra, okay, can't have a nuclear weapon, not in dispute. Over the last few months, he encouraged his foreign policy team to reach a deal with the Iranians to accomplish this goal. Okay, what does that mean? The president has made clear that Iran cannot have uranium enrichment. Well, he didn't make that clear. As we were following the early rounds of the negotiations, and there wouldn't have been any negotiation, because Iran has said we will not give up uranium enrichment. And he said, And he said repeatedly that this would happen one of two ways, the easy way or the other way. So the easy way, which is Iran capitulating on uranium enrichment, or the other way, which is bombing. Well, you can say Trump said this, but that's not really any kind of negotiation. And MAGA, just because you've said this, that doesn't mean MAGA is going to say, "Oh, well, that's okay. Since you said it, you said it." Now, then he says, Vance says, second, I've seen a lot of confusion over the issue of civilian nuclear power and uranium enrichment. These are distinct issues. Iran could have civilian nuclear power without enrichment, but Iran rejected that. Meanwhile, they've enriched uranium far above the level necessary for any civilian purpose. They've been found in violation of their non-proliferation obligations by the IAEA, which is hardly a right-wing organization. And then he says, it's one thing to want civilian nuclear energy, it's another thing to demand sophisticated enrichment capacity. And it's still another to cling to enrichment while simultaneously violating basic non-proliferation obligations and enriching right to the point of weapons-grade uranium. Now, there's so much wrong with what Vance says there. And I have to repeat again that under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, all states, nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states, are entitled to uranium enrichment. There's no prohibition at all on uranium enrichment. And Iran was entirely within its rights to enrich uranium. It was not in any way violating the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And there was an agreement in place, the JCPOA, that Trump walked out of in 2018. And he walked out of that agreement because what? I mean, we still don't know why he walked out, other than, I think, as Sinuk said, other than to keep his Israeli donors or the Jewish donors or whatever happy. And so that was there because Iran had done nothing wrong. No one had presented any case that Iran was in violation of its obligations. So why did then Iran? So up until then, I think it was whatever 3.5 or 3.25% or whatever the enrichment level that Iran was practicing. Anything that was above that 3.25%, Iran shipped out, and Russia collected this enriched uranium. The deal was working fine. What then happened was after Trump walked out, Iran wanted to maintain some leverage as an incentive for the United States to come back by saying, well, look, now that you've walked out, look, we're starting to enrich uranium. This is exactly what you didn't want to happen. So for J.D. Vance now to start talking about, oh, well, Iran's in violation of whatever. But that's the point, that it was, to the extent that Iran was in violation, it was because it was the United States just simply walked out on the JCPOA without really providing any kind of explanation. Now, Vance talks about the 60%, and then he said, oh, the IAEA said that it was in violation of their non-proliferation obligation. Yes, but even if that's the case, even if it's that it is in violation, it's not up to Israel and it's not up to the United States to go ahead and attack Iran to enforce some kind of obligations. You know, you need as a minimum to get agreement from the rest of the world, namely the UN Security Council. Otherwise, you're back where you were with the run up to the Iraq War, when exactly the same arguments were made then, which is, oh, well, you know, Saddam Hussein is in violation of his obligations. And so suddenly we need to bomb Iraq because Saddam Hussein is in violation of his obligations. Well, okay, if Iraq is in violation of his obligations, then go make your case at the UN Security Council. You need authorization. You don't just simply get to enforce resolutions by yourself. If it's a UN Security Council resolution, then it's up to the UN Security Council to decide how it intends to enforce it. Just like if it's the IAEA, which is an agency of the United Nations, if the IAEA says, oh, Iran is in violation of its non-proliferation treaty obligations, then it's again up to the United Nations to decide what he wants to do. It's not up to Netanyahu, it's not up to Trump to make these calls. And so J.D. Vance there is making exactly the same argument that was made at the time of the run-up to the war by all of those Bill Kristol and the AEI and Sean Hannity, Mark Levin again, and all of those warmongers. You know, Fox News, the Wall Street Journal editorial page, they're all making exactly the same arguments. Then, you know, we have to attack Iraq because Iraq is in violation of its UN Security Council resolution. And as I said before, it really wasn't. It was simply it was the Americans under Bill Clinton who withdrew the weapons inspectors from Iraq. So in the same way, it was Trump who had withdrawn from the JCPOA. And what is amazing about what J.D. Vance says there is that his entire career, what makes him a kind of, I mean, it's a meteoric rise. I mean, he's a young man and he's already vice president and thought to be the front runner for the GOP nomination for 2028. It's a meteoric political rise. Not, you know, I don't know anyone who's done that. Well, I guess Obama. I mean, no one since Obama has done that. And the cause of his meteoric rise is that, you know, he served his country and he was lied to. America was lied to. That's his whole shtick. America was lied to by Bush and Cheney. We were lied to. We were lied to about Saddam Hussein and his weapons of mass destruction. We were lied to. My friends and I, we were sent to Iraq on the basis of lies. That's his thing. That's what he rose to power on. And here he is, word for word, repeating the same crap that Bill Kristol and David Fromm and all those AEI guys and, you know, did in the run-up to the invasion of Iraq. Exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing. Oh, we have to do it because Saddam Hussein is in violation of something or other. For somebody whose entire career, if it wasn't for that shtick of, oh, we were lied to, and I served my country, and you know, my friends, you know, my comrades, you know, we were shot at, and we went there on the basis of lies, and now you're spreading these same lies yourself. Anyway, have I answered your question? Yeah. Now, so you know, I guess I don't see Trump as doing the 5D chess. I don't see him betraying Israel. I see it. You know, he's identified himself with Israel, and I don't think that he's going to turn around and say to Iran, you know what? I agree to your you know, your right to enrich uranium, you know, and so, because he'll just be told, hey, that means you lost the war. Iran has won the war. Now, in other words, we're now in this cycle whereby you can't back down, because if you back down, then Iran has won, Putin has won, Xi Jinping has won. So it can't happen. Anyway, thank you very much, Robert. Always appreciate your comments and your generosity. Carlos says, did you see Piers Morgan being an ass yesterday with Professor Morandi? Yes, I did. I have to say, I find Piers Morgan just so unacceptable, so unappealing, so disgusting, that it's actually really hard work watching him. So I don't watch it as often as I should, because it's just very hard for me to tolerate Piers Morgan. But it was quite an extraordinary event, because Morandi was in that television studio that had just been bombed by Israel. I mean, I'm sure everyone knows about it. That right in the middle of a broadcast, boom, the studio was attacked, and the presenter, had to flee for her life. So Morandi was in that building. I think it was before the hit. I mean, he was there. I think Israel had said they were going to hit it, and so he was there before the hit. But nonetheless, he was obviously risking his life in staying in that building. And Piers Morgan, as I say, it's so hard. Just when I have to think about his face and his awful voice and his accent and everything, it's disgusting. But Piers Morgan, rather than commend Morandi for his courage, essentially your physical courage in staying in a building that's about to be bombed, he got into a whole thing attacking Morandi. He's an apologist for the regime, and then and so on. And then Morandi kind of called him a coward and everything. And so the entire discussion, to the extent there's a discussion, was simply name calling. I mean, there was nothing in it. It was just name calling. But what was really obnoxious about it, leave aside the name calling, is that Piers Morgan didn't in any way express any kind of appreciation. I mean, you may not like someone, but you have to at least commend someone's courage. You can say, look, I mean, if you're staying in a building that's likely to be attacked, you're risking your life. But Piers Morgan didn't even seem to appreciate. He just kept denouncing Iran, and he didn't even appreciate the point that this is a war crime. A television studio is not a legitimate military target. We went through this during the war in Yugoslavia, where NATO hit Radio Television Serbia, claiming, that's a legitimate military target because it's part of Milosevic's propaganda machine. But of course it wasn't. It's still a civilian target. Newspaper, you say a newspaper, you may think it's a propaganda outfit. It's still a civilian target, and therefore it's not a legitimate military target. And Piers Morgan seemed not to appreciate it. He just went on ranting about how terrible the Iranian regime was. So, as always with Piers Morgan, you feel stupider at the end of the show than when you came in. I always feel like, well, I've kind of lost a few IQ points over the past hour and a half. I'm now a stupider person than I was before. I mean, that's the effect that it has on the. It's just it was an awful thing, Judy Hotchkiss, always good to see you, Judy. Always appreciate your very thoughtful and incisive comments. And Judy responds to the question that was asked earlier about about but Tulsi Gabbard and whether that essentially Trump. I don't know whether you can exactly say pushed her under the bus. He made her look ridiculous. And Judy says Tulsi Gabbard accuses media of taking her out of context after Trump addresses Iran assessment. And then he says CNN asked Trump aboard Air Force One, which is what we were watching, to respond to remarks reportedly made by Gabbard. Trump said, "I don't care what she said." And then in response, Gabbard clarified in a post shared by CNN reporter Sarah Ferris that she and the president were aligned in their assessment in March. Let me click on that link. I mean, so how are they aligned? This is from the Daily Caller, and Tulsi Gabbard, I don't care what blah blah. And she says, so this is what this is how the Daily Caller is reporting it. This is what Daily Caller describing what. I have to. All right, let me see if I can. I'll disable my ad blocker. Pause on this side. God, that's so annoying. All right, pause on this side, and yeah, here we are. I paused it, so now I should be able to read this. Yeah. 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 So yeah, there we are. In response, yeah, Gabbard clarified in a post shared by CNN Capitol Hill reporter Sarah Ferris that she and the president were aligned in their assessments in March. And here's now the quoting from her tweet. President Trump was saying the same thing that I said in my annual threat assessment back in March. Unfortunately, too many people in the media don't care to actually read what I said, Gabbard stated in an official document, which was later confirmed by the caller. Confirmed to the caller by the office of the ODNI. DNI Gabbard tells us she and the Trump are on the same page when it comes to Iran nuclear timeline. And then blah, blah, dum, 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 dum. In her March testimony before Congress, Gabbard offered detailed insight into the intelligence community assessment of the Iranian nuclear threat, which were highlighted in two transcript experts, blah, blah, blah. The intelligence community continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons. Gabbard continued, highlighting that there still appears to be a reason for concern. In the past year, we've seen erosion of the decades-long taboo in Iran on discussing nuclear weapons in public, likely emboldening nuclear weapons advocates within Iran's decision-making apparatus. Iran's enriched stockpile is at its highest level and is unprecedented for a state without nuclear weapons. And then Gabbard insisted again to reporters Tuesday on Capitol Hill that her testimony in March is consistent with Trump. Anyway, I'm not buying it. I'm sorry, because we know exactly what she said, and that's not the same thing as, that Iran is close to having a nuclear weapon, which is what Trump said. I mean, by saying, well, there's cause for concern. Yeah, there may be cause for concern. That's not the same thing as saying what Trump said, which is Iran is close to having a nuclear weapon. And so, I mean, I think Tulsi is trying to hold on to her job. to be frank. I mean, it's Trump said, "I don't care what she said," and said, "Oh no, we're on the same page." You're not on the same page. I mean, whichever way you look at it, you're saying something different. I mean, everyone can see. Well, one says Iran's very close to having a nuclear weapon, and the other one says, "Well, we're a little concerned about the 60% enrichment." Well, 60% enrichment, that doesn't mean anything. You have to have the will to weaponize that. And the intelligence community said there's no will to weaponize it. So anyway, thank you, Judy. And then we have Vic Shakapopoulos. Oh, no, more on Cyprus. All right, please read this till the end before you start your comments. All right. I got to say that discussions with you can be frustrating. Oh, sorry to hear about that. Whenever I send a long message where I make my case, you read the first 1-2 sentences and start refuting a straw man argument that has nothing to do with my point, okay? For example, I point out that your claim about the Greeks being a minority on Cyprus is demonstrably false, particularly when I never said that. I mean, this is why I talk, because you say things that are patently false. I said always have said the Greeks are a majority on the island. They always were the majority on the island. They were much overwhelmingly demographic weight than the Turkish Cypriots. But that's neither here nor there. As I pointed out last time. But anyway, I'll go on. So don't say I said they're a minority. They're not a minority. They always were a majority. That doesn't help your case. And it never helped the Enosis case that they had the majority there. A lot of places people are a majority, but that doesn't make their claim legal or legitimate. Is demonstrably false because the islands and since the 3rd century BC. Again, we're not arguing about the 3rd century BC. All right, go on. And you deflect and start your case, population is not everything. Yep, that's exactly right. I never claimed that. I just pointed out your factual mistake. They never made the factual mistake. Your factual mistake is that I ever said that the Greeks were a minority. The Greeks were always a majority. That's not that was it. I always said that the Greeks were the majority. Overwhelmingly the majority, and they were making their Enosis cases since the 1940s and 1950s, and the British ignored their cases. Number 3. Then I argued that the pursuit of Enosis is just a decolonization, self-determination case. You can't really compare it to the secessions of Yugoslavia or the USSR. Cyprus was a British colony, and the local Greeks fought the British colonial administration. Yeah, okay. So they could achieve the union. Nobody on the island voted to become an independent state. You instead start talking about the 1974 coup. I never said the coup was a good idea, and I didn't ask you to condemn Turkey. That's beside the point. Yeah, but the point was that Enosis has never been accepted, and the status of Cyprus was always a kind of a peculiar one, which the British were partly responsible, the Turkey was partly responsible, Greece was partly responsible, United Nations was partly responsible. So it had an odd status, which means that anything that involves Enosis would involve all of the powers agreeing to it, which wasn't going to happen. Now you talk about the United Nations and the decolonization. That doesn't mean that the United Nations ever, even remotely, accepted all claims to self-determination. Not even close. So just bringing up the United Nations, yeah, it's a kind of a general aspiration. Something may be aspirational. It doesn't mean it has any legal standing. All right, so next one. This is a long tweet. Not long set of messages. You are conflating the 1974 coup with the idea of Enosis. No, I never said. You asked me about the crisis in Cyprus. The present crisis in Cyprus, the Turkish occupation of northern Cyprus, stems from the coup. That's why I talk about the coup. You can talk about Enosis. You can talk about, to your heart's content, but the union with Greece, and maybe I'm sure there are a lot of Greeks who would like that to happen, but there's no prospect of its happening. But the 1974 coup is what brought about the present state of affairs, which is, I think, highly undesirable. Anyway, the idea is as old as the modern state of Greece itself. It's been around for over 200 years. I'm defending the idea as legitimate, okay, although unrealistic in the 1950s power politics setting when the decolonization actually happened. But if, for example, he was executing at some other moment in this 200-year timeline, for example, let's say the Brits would give away Cyprus to Greece in the aftermath of World War II. All right, well, okay. Look, any self-determination stands or falls in accordance with a number of factors. I mean, obviously, population, who has the demographic weight, self-determination, that counts. But most important is the whether it's done in a legal way, and that's the most important part. When it's done in a legal, legitimate way, what is legal? Well, at a minimum, it's acceptable to key players, and then it's rubber stamped by the United Nations. I mean, roughly. I mean, there's a lot of legal ways to do it, but that's the way it's done. Kosovo was never done in any legal way. It was, the breakup of Yugoslavia was never legal. The breakup of the USSR was never legal. I have every sympathy. I mean, I don't have anything at all against Enosis, but I don't. But it's not something that it's on the agenda, let's say. And then go on, and then Greece in the summer of Cyprus, Greece, aftermath of World War II, to rally support for the Greek government that they were helping against the communist uprising. Yeah, it's not hard to imagine that it could have been executed, because in the 1940s, the UK was much stronger than Turkey. Turkey was much weaker than in the next decade or during World War I, in order to take away Greece to fight for Entente. Just before the Great War, there actually was a deal on the table. Churchill proposed to exchange Cyprus for a naval base in the Ionian Sea. Okay, that's very nice. That's all I was trying to say, and you just kept coming back to the nutty, crazy people executed a coup. What were they expecting? Could you agree on these 2 points I made? One is a historical fact. The other one is a modest opinion. I'm not touching this topic again, but I wanted to make myself clear, because I think there was a misunderstanding of my position on your part. Well, as I said, I've never said Greeks were a minority. I always said, and everyone will remember, the Greeks were the majority population of Cyprus, and there may well be lots and lots of legitimate grounds for enosis. I have no problem at all with enosis. And you're right. At the time when Turkey was much weaker, the British could absolutely have insisted on Turkey accepting that the Cyprus being attached to Greece, and the perfectly reasonable arguments. But and that goes back to my point. I mean, that when this happened was 1974, and that was a disaster. That was it. But in principle, I don't have a problem with enosis. So. And so anyway, I think. So anyway, so I think that's about all I can say about it. Judy, always good to see you. I've already said that before, but I want to thank you for your generosity. Judy says, yes, Trump sounds nuts on his true social truths, but he did say yesterday on Air Force One that he may send Vance or his special Mideast envoy Steve Witkoff to meet with Iranian officials, saying it depends on what happens when I get back to Washington. Yeah, no, if you recall, I played that part earlier. I don't know what he means by that. I mean, it's I would imagine, given all the things that he has said, that if there is this meeting with Vance and Witkoff, then essentially it's going to be an ultimatum. There'll be a meeting. Vance and Witkoff will present Iran with an ultimatum. I imagine the ultimatum is immediate dismantlement of your entire nuclear program. We're going to bring in our trucks, our planes, and we're just going to ship everything out. Not just the enriched uranium, but everything. All of your laboratories, your centrifuges, everything will just shipped out. And I imagine that's what they're going to demand. That's what Trump seemed to be hinting at, that's what these negotiations will be, an ultimatum. Trump's assumption that this would be acceptable to Iran is based on his claim that Iran is on its last legs. It's been hit so hard by Israel that it will have no choice but to capitulate. Alternative to that, what Trump would be saying is Israel and the United States together will continue to bomb Iran, as John McCain put it, bomb until essentially the rule of the Ayatollahs is broken, and there's nothing left. And I think so. He's saying, well, you can still cut a deal. It means essentially capitulation or unconditional surrender, the way he formulated it, and then the bombing will stop. I think that seems to be what Trump's saying, that, hey, this is your last chance. You get to meet J.D. Vance and Witkoff, but essentially you have to surrender. This is to sign your surrender, like General Keitel and Yodel on May the 8th, 1945, signed the unconditional surrender to in the presence of Eisenhower. So I imagine that's what Trump is thinking, and that's what he's claiming. We don't know exactly what the military capability is. As I pointed out, it may be that Iran's got something left in the tank and may have a lot of heavy missiles that it can put to use. But I think these negotiations will be a sham. I mean, it's just a demand for capitulation. I don't think Iran is willing to capitulate unless it really is on its last legs. I don't think it is, but we don't know exactly what's going on there. So, anyway, thank you very much, Judy. Now, and where are we? Okay, yeah. And then Vic comes back and says, "Do you believe they can take out the Iranian leadership just by airstrike, or without a ground invasion, those bombings won't achieve much?" Well, it's a good question. I mean, I think that it depends on how much chaos and turmoil that would cause. If Iran capitulates, if let's say this meeting happens, they meet Witkoff and J.D. Vance, and Iran needs to surrender all of its nuclear material and centrifuges and so on. I think that would be so much, it would weaken the rule of the Ayatollahs so much that they may not be able to survive. That there would be just, once you have an authoritarian government survives by the fear of the populace. You don't challenge it. But now suddenly they're seen weak, ineffective, and I think that then the moment could be very, very difficult for the Ayatollahs. So I think that if they just keep bombing, then they can probably survive. It'll be similar to the bombing of, in the case of Serbia and Milosevic. You can just keep bombing and bombing, and then you have to raise the question: will there be a will in the United States, in Europe, to just go on bombing Iran? You're seeing all the killing, all the destruction. Will public opinion tolerate the ongoing just bombing of Iran? I don't know. I mean but I think if you just keep bombing, probably the regime can survive. I think capitulation, if there is a capitulation on the issue of nuclear material, I think then the regime doesn't survive. So I think in the way, the worst thing for the Ayatollahs now would be to sign some kind of an unconditional surrender with the Americans. Their best bet probably is just to take the bombing and then hope that public opinion will turn against this bombing. I mean, as it was doing in the case of Serbia in '99. I mean, there was a point at which public opinion was just becoming disgusted with you're just beating and beating a country that really is unable to fight back, and I think there'll be just public revulsion. There'll certainly be revulsion against Trump. So that may be Iran's best hope. Get your head down and say, okay, just keep bombing, see what you get. And I think that way, I think the regime may survive. I think it'll be Trump who'll have to back down. And so that was my and then Vic says, and also thank you for your attention to this matter. Yeah, thank you. It's very funny, Trump putting that in. He always puts it in his truths, which it's a very odd expression. There's a kind of passive aggressive quality to it. It's lawyers like to do it. When they send you a really mean and nasty letter, and then they thank you for your attention to this matter. It's a little like have a nice day. Somebody's just told you that they're going to sue you, and then having told you they're going to sue you, they say have a nice day. So it's like there's a passive aggressive quality to it, very unmanly on Trump's part. I think it's anyway. Marty sends the a picture of Maloney and Macron engaging in this conversation during the G7 meeting, and it was very interesting because Macron was saying something to her. I don't know what exactly he was saying, and she kept making all these faces. Now, normally she makes faces when at Macron. I mean, she just finds him. She just something about him that rubs her the wrong way. But here she seemed to be listening to whatever Macron was saying, and she was kind of making faces in some tacit agreement with whatever message Macron was trying to convey. So she kind of rolled her eyes and dropped her mouth the way she tends to do. I mean, her face is great. I mean, it's a very expressive face. But I don't know. I mean, Martin, if you know, if people have some idea of what it was that Macron was saying, it was very intriguing, because her faces was so vivid. So I'd love to know what it was that Macron said to her. But it's a very funny picture. So anyway, Marty, as always, thank you for all your contributions. And thank you for your generosity. I really appreciate it. And there's a picture of Trump and Starmer, with Trump dropping some papers from the folder. Whoops! And then it's Starmer, the one who starts picking up the papers. That's known as kind of one-upmanship. The one-upmanship is that you drop the papers on the ground, and instead of you crouching down and picking up the papers that you dropped on the ground, you get the other person to pick up the paper. That's the one-upmanship. There was I know people know of the English writer Stephen Potter, who made a whole specialty. He wrote about lifemanship, gamesmanship, and one-upmanship. There was, in fact, a movie, Ian Carmichael and Terry Thomas, the School of One-Upmanship. And the whole point of the School of One-Up is how you get to be one-up on people, and that's a classic. You drop something, and then somebody else who is obligated to crouch down, not very comfortable, and to pick up all of the documents. So that's real kind of one-upmanship. So Stephen Potter, lifemanship, gamesmanship, and one-upmanship. I think that's what Trump is doing there. Aristotle 1. Amazing that the neocons always wins. Shows a real will to power. Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. It's quite... yesterday, John Podhoretz sent out a tweet saying, my father is 95 and a half years old. His father is, of course, Norman Podhoretz, longtime editor of Commentary magazine, one of the founders of neoconservatism. He's 95 and a half years old. And he said, my father advocated bombing Iran back in 2005. And I'm so happy, he says, I'm so happy that he's lived to see it finally come about. He had to wait 20 years finally to come. So there he is, he's 95 and a half. And what a wonderful present to a 95 and a half year old man. We're bombing Iran. So Stone River says, George for UN Secretary General. I heartily concur. Yeah, I want to do that. Yeah, pencil me in. Thank you very much for that. Excellent idea. Thank you for your generosity, Stone River. I really appreciate that. And then NKMRD says, regarding Tulsi Gabbard, it's sometimes a 50-50 win-lose, leaving a post at such a point in time. Yeah, I agree. I believe personally, from how I observe more small-town politics in my country, I think it's it's, if you quit, let's say you quit the administration and say, oh, Trump is selling out to Putin. I'm disgusted, that, he's kowtowing to Putin. You quit, both MSNBC snaps you up as a commentator, CNN snaps you up as a commentator. That horrible, horrible, poisonous woman, Fiona Hill, that was her shtick. Oh, Trump is selling out to Putin. And, she never looked back. She quit the administration and then went around saying that Trump was selling out to Putin. But if you're Tulsi Gabbard and you quit and you say, hey, I don't think there was any reason to go to war against Iran. I don't think Iran had done anything wrong. I looked at the intelligence. The intelligence didn't suggest that Iran was weaponizing its nuclear material. Who's going to hire you? MSNBC isn't, CNN isn't, Fox News definitely isn't, because the Fox News is taking a very different line, the opposite to that. So you don't have a gig to go to. Now, probably she can, have her own Substack and do her own podcast, and she'll make some money. But it's not the same thing as being ODNI. So I don't think she's going to quit. And as Judy gave us that link, it's clear that she's already making amends, saying, yeah, Trump, the president and I, we're all on the same page. Anyway, Dan Rock says, absolutely agree. If she had any integrity, she'd quit. Absolutely. Somebody says, I don't care what she said. The president says, I don't care what my director of national intelligence, the person I appointed as director of national intelligence, the person who's responsible for gathering all the intelligence from all the agencies, present them to me. I don't care what she says. I know better than she does about Iran's capability. That you have to quit. I don't see how you can, in good faith, continue in that position. And then Danrock says, "Well, Vance's post wasn't any less nutty, more well spoken, perhaps." Yeah, I agree. He just it exactly. I mean, I think he just presented the argument of absolutely exactly the same neocon argument on Iraq. But yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous because he's now justifying that which he's spent his whole career, his adult political career, denouncing the lies that got us into Iraq. So he's now doing exactly the same thing, the lies to get us into a war with Iran. Anyway, Dan Rock then says, Piers Morgan is despicable. Yeah, absolutely. He really is. He also claimed the whole world was against Iran. Yeah, he did. Then said, except China, Russia, and North Korea. Then added Pakistan. That's quite a few billions. Add the entire Africa, Indonesia, Malaysia, etc. You're absolutely right. And incidentally, you add to that the Arab world. So you can't even play the Arab card. Oh yeah, the Arabs, they all hate Iran. They're all terrified of Iran. They want us to take out the Ayatollahs. The Saudis. The absolute ones. The Saudis aren't saying that. None of the Gulf states are saying that. They're all expressing solidarity with Iran. So if you don't even have the Arab countries supporting you, Egypt isn't supporting you, then who do you have? Well, of course, it's the same familiar cast of characters, the NATO EU gang. And then NKMRD says, I remember the chief and finance minister of a smaller liberal party here quitting because of some disagreement last government, and it was a lot of media spectacle and blame gaming, and even the chancellor got emotional at the time. Definitely something for the media. Yeah, that's And then Dan Rock, thank you for your generosity. Thanks for your time, George. Thank you very much, Dan Rock. Really appreciate that. And there was a lot to talk about today. Thank you, everybody who had joined me. Questions and contributions. Above all, thank you for those who put something into the tip jar. The dogs are asleep at the moment, but they'll be awake tomorrow, ready to pounce. So thank you, everybody who makes my life a little easier. And then Dan Rock says, so what do these Arab countries do? How can they condemn Israel's attack, but then allow the U.S. to use their bases? Well, that's a good question. It's not clear yet whether they will allow the U.S. to use their bases. So far, the U.S. is making a lot of noise. We're going to do this, we're going to do that, blah, 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 blah. But it's not clear to me the U.S. will use those bases. I'm not sure they're going to allow that, but we'll have to see. But that's a very important point. Will the U.S. get to use those bases? Because if the U.S. does use those bases, then those countries become legitimate military targets for Iran. Anyway, thank you everybody for today, and we will be back the same time on Thursday. Look forward to that. Until then, all the best. Goodbye.